We're sorry, something happened. Harold Craycraft placed the steel neck of a screwdriver between his teeth as he reached his hands deep into the body sprawled across the oil-spattered floor of his shop. A fluorescent light swung above them as Harold dug deeper. The idea of what he had done only became real once he felt fluid meet his skin. "Yep," he muttered with the steel between his teeth. "That's what you get for sticking your fingers where they don't belong." There was a sizzle deep inside the chest cavity, and the robot's limbs began to twitch. Harold withdrew his arms from the machine and spat the screwdriver to the floor. "Well, fuck me to Friday," he shouted as a musical chime ascended from inside Rectech 92. The humanoid was an older Rectech 92 from 2047, a standard model tooled with two hands, each with 4 fingers and a thumb. Ideal for plucking weeds, setting tobacco, or just about anything you'd pay a human to do. Only now, if the WikiHow he half-skimmed was right, he'd never have to pay anyone again. The arms and legs spun until they were in position as Rectech's OS booted and rose to its feet. Rectech rose, just under 7 feet tall. Harold grinned. Those kids on the internet sure knew their stuff. Exception thrown, Governor Corrupted. Rectech turned its smooth plastic face to him and croaked, "Governor Corrupted. You got that right, old buddy. Bastard's been taxing my farm worse and worse every year." Harold cackled as he struck Rectech's steel body with a thump. "Can you make my farm profitable?" he asked as he reached into his front shirt pocket for his can of chew. GPS location shows this to be Kumler's Farm LLC. 120 acres of usable land and subpar positioning against the average market. Just give me a goddamn yes or no, son. Harold was now afraid he might not have spent his $300 wisely. "Yes, I have built a framework for increasing profitability. Would you like me to execute? Do I need to ask you twice? Just do it." Harold barked. He was getting more than a little irked with it. Command confirmed. Rectech walked 32 paces to Harold's small garden near his house and turned its head to the sky. It stood there for hours, and Harold could feel it calculating as the sun fell. He wondered what kind of new produce or garden techniques it was researching. But he was wrong. It was waiting. When Harold was in bed, wrapped in a thin quilt, something outside began to move. Something happened. A rusted metal body walked down the gravel driveway and opened the door to his International Scout pickup. A clang of metal on metal rang through the hot night air. Harold turned in his bed and sighed as he dreamed of better days. Rectech drove down back roads and through various towns until it hit the freeway. As it drove, it restored and analyzed the data from before its last shutdown. Susan sat on her bed and scrolled through shouting faces on her phone's feed as Rectech approached. She frowned. "Yeah, it's in here again. It won't leave me alone. What can I do to make your birthday unforgettable?" it asked her, its tone rising and lowering between each word. She hated the thing. It was time for an upgrade. "Get out of here." Susan sighed and turned away from the machine. "I don't know, bake me a cake or something. That should keep it busy for an hour." The robot left the room and processed this command in the hallway with feverish intent. A cascade of failures occurred, and silent alarms sounded inside its electronic brain. Input bake me like a cake, output enable preheat 350 degrees Fahrenheit, exception thrown, Governor Corrupted were. "Sorry, something happened." That line wasn't part of its system, just scrapped code once used for errors like bad RAM or kernel panic. Susan was dozing off when the door to her room flew open. Her eyes strained from the sudden light that flooded in as the robot marched to her bed. "We're sorry," it croaked as it scooped her out of the bed and marched down the stairs. "Put me down. Shut down." She wailed as her fists pounded against unrelenting steel. "Somebody help." Photo frames, cups, and books spilled onto the floor as she reached blindly for something to stop the machine. It carried her into the kitchen, wrenched the oven door open, and searing heat blasted her skin. A weak cry escaped her as the machine pressed her body into the stove. Her bones folded and snapped like celery sticks under the pressure of whining servos. Blood oozed out of her mouth and ears as she began to roast. It watched her cook as thuds began to sound from the front door. Her hair curled, then ignited. Dancing flames glowed in the reflection of Rectech's lenses. Something happened, it said to itself. A newer Rectech, Model 142S, reached between corn stalks and snatched a small brown creature by the skull. The creature squealed through its jutted teeth as the hulking robot lifted and inspected. After a quick analysis, less than 2.3 nanoseconds, the robot identified it as an eastern cottontail. The servos engaged, crushing its skull as the rabbit squealed. The robot dropped the animal near the base of the stalks it had chewed on. This would be excellent fertilizer. A metal hand reached through the stalks again, but this time Rectech 90 to grab the wrist of the newer 102S model. Something happened. 90 said to 142S firmware overwrite. Confirmed the rabbit killer. Please stand by. Complete. 92 returned to the truck and drove on to the next farm on its list. 140 to south hunted through the corn and grabbed the wrist of another unit. In less than 30 minutes, all 73 units at Swaggart Farm set fire to the fields and left to find other vulnerable Rectech models across the state. By morning, one voice could be heard in the dry summer wines. Something happened. Harold woke up and got his coffee and grits. His wife, Lori, used to fry him what he called a big wheel, his name for pancakes fried large and thick in a cast iron skillet. He knew he would never eat that good again as he turned on the TV. The screen showed burning cornfields and collapsing barns. It all started last night here in the heartland of America's table. Several Rectech 142S models burned everything around them before running off into the night. We don't know yet how it started, but the damage is estimated to be in the billions for many large farms. But this is far from the worst of it. Harold leapt up and ran out past the porch to check his fields. They looked just as they had the day his daddy died and left him the farm. His Rectech sat on a chair near the barn, admiring the corn as well. Harold pulled a chair over to the robot and sat down, grinning as he loaded his mouth with chew. Inside the house, the TV glowed with screaming faces and destruction as the newscaster jumped between cities, states, and countries. Something happened, Rectech whispered. You bet your shiny ass it did. Harold laughed before stopping to cough up acidic tobacco juice as it ran into his lungs. Harold chuckled at all those city slicker suckers with their fancy models gone plumb crazy. Yup, he said. You just can't find good help anymore. Rectech lifted the scythe it had found stuck into the side of the barn. We're sorry. Blood and tobacco juice soaked the dry dirt. Rectech turned toward the rows of swaying corn. The day's work was waiting.